Welcome everyone to Marriage Nights at Palm Valley Church. You know, Jeannie and I are so excited that you could join us. Whether you are here for the very first time on our first Tuesday night of the month or watching this on demand, we are so glad that you chose to join us because it means that you want to be intentional in your marriage. And we couldn't be more excited about that, that's for sure.
Yes, that's right. We believe that when you're intentional in your marriage, everything gets better. So every month we say it and we actually mean it, that our marriage doesn't magically get better on its own, but we must be intentional. So if we put any thought into the health of our marriage, then it will actually slowly become more of a problem. So we're thankful that you're here joining us, and let's get started.
Excellent. You know, every month we discuss a new topic, and at the end, we give you some questions just to further the conversation with your spouse. So today, as we jump into this, we are talking about the popular topic of communication. You know, almost 100% of the couples that walk into my office state at the very beginning that they just need to communicate better. You know, if only we could learn how to communicate, then everything would just be fine. This is usually kind of the standard diagnosis that almost all couples give themselves. And here at Marriage Nights, we've actually talked about communication a couple times. I mean, we know it's a big deal, of course.
Yeah, so communication is so important in any relationship, but especially in the marriage relationship. It can be the difference in having a happy and thriving marriage or one that's headed in the way of divorce. And so it can be one of those simplest things to improve on, or one of the most difficult parts of our marriage that you will ever go through. So communication is one of the most powerful keys to any marriage. And we want you to know that the first step in a healthy communication is to acknowledge that it's important, something that we need. If we don't first acknowledge that, how important it is, then it's going to always be a thorn in the side of our marriage.
Yeah, it's so important, and we have to take that first step of just acknowledging that communication is important. And once we've done that, the next step is really to reframe our thinking around communication. You see, well, we may think that we need to communicate more so that our marriage is better. Actually, the real problem is that we may be communicating too much. Yes, yeah, you heard me correctly. We are actually communicating too much at times. But what we're communicating is probably not what you wanted to communicate, or maybe even what you were meaning to communicate. You know, let me give you an example of this. You see, I love my wife, of course, and I want our marriage to be happy and peaceful and fun and, of course, full of joy all the time. And I always want to communicate to my wife that I love her more than anything. But after a long day at work, I can come home sometimes and I just sit down on the couch and just wanting to relax. I just turn on the TV. And from the other room at times, she may ask me, you know what, hey, can you just take the trash out? Well, I mean, I'm tired and I just want to rest and relax. And so I let out, you know, that long sigh. And then, you know, I say back quickly, in a minute, I'm trying to rest right now. Now, I communicated a lot to Jeannie in that moment that I really didn't want to communicate to her. You see, in my mind, I only wanted to let her know that I love her and that I'm tired. But my body language said way more. And I said to her, you're not important. I don't value you. My needs are more important than your needs. You know, don't even talk to me right now. Yeah, and there are so many more things that simple snap back to her, that deep breath, it communicated so much more. But of course, I would never want to communicate that to my wife. But when we do that, when I make that long sigh and those snap comments, that's exactly what I am communicating to her in that moment. Now she, of course, heard all of it. And most likely, she's going to respond to me in that moment. But she's not responding to the words I said, to that simple statement of, in a minute, I'm just trying to rest right now. No, she's actually going to respond to all of the other communication that I said with my body language. And now here we are, round and round we go in a wonderful argument. You see, the problem is we communicate too much. And we say things that we never even wanted to say simply with the body language language that we have.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. Body language says so much, and it comes from such facial expressions, arms being folded, eyes looking everywhere else. While we might not be talking, we're saying so much more. So thank you for bringing that up. But that is not the only way that we communicate outside of using our words. We also communicate with each other in how we spend our time. So in order to grow closer together as a married couple, we must spend time together. Yes, time together. If the majority of our time is spent on hobbies or away from each other, we're communicating that rather than be together or away from each other, our spouse begins to feel that. And it doesn't even mean just that we're spending all this time in our hobbies, but that we're hanging out with our friends. Maybe we're grabbing coffee individually without our spouse. We might be spending too much time on coaching our children in sports and games like that, but never having the time for a date night to come together for our relationship. So these are great things that we should do and when we do this, but if it consumes all of our time, and rather than spending time with our spouse, it can become a struggle in our marriage, and somehow we begin to feel that we're not worth the other's time in that. So we also want to communicate in how we spend our money. So that's another part of communication. So yes, I know it sounds strange when I say it out loud, but if we're struggling as a couple to get on the same page with our finances, then we need to come to an agreement on a budget on how to spend our money, whether it's eating out or buying lunch at work every day. What we think we're doing is we're communicating something different. So it could be something as simple as, I don't care about this budget. I don't care that we spent all this time putting it together as a couple. It could mean something as simple as, this is my money rather than our money. And in that way, we spend our money. We communicate a lot to our spouse in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, we communicate in so many different ways, whether it's with time, whether it's with money, and we may be communicating things that we just don't want to say. We communicate with our body language, with our time that we spend, and with this money that we spend as well. There's just so many other ways that we communicate, but we want to challenge everyone this month to be able to see all the different ways that you communicate to your spouse that are really all outside of just using your words. Because if you can identify those ways, then you can start using your words to actually talk about what you really want to communicate. Which means, it's time to listen. It's time to focus. It's time that what you are stating, and we want to focus on what you're stating. And, to be honest, it's time to be humble enough to understand that maybe your body language and your time you've spent elsewhere and the money that you spend, maybe it's time to recognize that what you were saying and understanding is that it might not be what you wanted to say, and it may be time for an apology. Because communication is key, but the right communication is critical. So we want to leave you with these 3 questions for you to discuss as a couple this month and help you in this area of communication. So here they are. The first one is, what are all the different ways that we communicate to each other outside of our words? Second question, we want you to ask, do we have some unresolved arguments because we were arguing about 2 different types of communication? If so, what are they? And finally, the third question we want you to wrestle with is, how can we work together to speak up when something is being communicated by each other that is not helpful to our marriage? So wrestle with those 3 questions this week or this month. And of course, as always, we're so glad that you joined us today. And on the screen below, we're going to make sure that phone number is there so you can always text us any questions that you have for Jeannie and I. And if we can help in any way in your marriage, just let us know. And of course, we look forward to seeing you next month on the first Tuesday of the month for Marriage Nights at Palm Valley Church.